In the years after the American Revolution, the United States faced a new kind of crisis. It was not a battle against Britain, but a conflict from within. The war was over, but the peace that followed was uneasy. The government under the Articles of Confederation was weak, and the country was deep in debt. Out of this tension came a violent uprising that tested the limits of the new nation. This event became known as Shays Rebellion. After the revolution ended in 1783, the United States was a fragile confederation of states. The national government had little power. It could not raise taxes or regulate trade. Each state had to handle its own debts from the war. In Massachusetts, the state government imposed high taxes to pay back wealthy creditors. These taxes had to be paid in hard money, such as gold or silver. For farmers in the western part of the state, this was a serious problem. Most of them earned little cash. Their wealth existed in land and crops, not coins. When they could not pay, their property was seized and auctioned off. Some were even sent to debtors' prison. Many of these farmers were veterans of the Revolution. They had fought for independence and returned home expecting opportunity and freedom. Instead, they found themselves losing their farms and livelihoods. To them, the new government seemed no better than the old British rule they had rebelled against. By 1786, anger and frustration in rural Massachusetts began to boil over. Farmers met in local conventions to discuss their grievances. They demanded lower taxes, the issuance of paper money, and an end to property seizures. But the Massachusetts legislature, dominated by merchants and wealthy elites from the East, refused to act. To the farmers, this was proof that the government no longer represented ordinary people. One of these farmers was Daniel Shays, a former captain in the Continental Army. He had served bravely during the Revolution and returned home to find himself in debt. His farm was threatened with foreclosure. Shays became a leading voice for the farmers, who began calling themselves regulators. They decided to take direct action. In the summer of 1786, groups of armed farmers began shutting down local courts to prevent them from hearing debt cases. Their logic was simple. If the courts could not meet, no one could be tried or imprisoned for unpaid taxes. In August, protesters gathered at the courthouse in Northampton and blocked judges from entering. Similar events took place in Worcester, Concord, and Great Barrington. The protests were largely non-violent, but they defied state authority. Governor James Bowdoin and the Massachusetts legislature saw these actions as a threat to law and order. They called the protesters rebels and traitors. The government did not have the money to raise an army, so it turned to wealthy merchants for funding. These merchants financed a private militia to put down the rebellion. In January of 1787, Daniel Shays and his followers planned to march on the federal arsenal in Springfield, Massachusetts. Their goal was to seize weapons and supplies. They believed this would give them the power to demand reforms. But the state militia, led by General Benjamin Lincoln, was already preparing to stop them. On January 25, 1787, the rebels approached the arsenal. The defending militia fired warning shots, then opened fire with cannon. 4 rebels were killed, and the rest scattered in confusion. This event, known as the Attack on the Springfield Armory, marked the turning point of the rebellion. In the following weeks, the militia pursued the rebels across western Massachusetts. Dozens were captured. Some leaders, including Shays, fled north into Vermont. The rebellion was effectively over by February 1787. In total, several people were killed and hundreds were arrested. 2 men were executed for their involvement, though most were later pardoned. Daniel Shays himself eventually received amnesty and lived quietly in New York until his death in 1825. Although the rebellion was crushed, its impact was significant. It exposed the deep economic and political divisions in post-revolution America. It showed that the Articles of Confederation were too weak to maintain stability. The national government lacked the power to respond to domestic unrest or support struggling citizens. Wealthy leaders feared that similar uprisings could spread to other states. Only months after Shays Rebellion ended, delegates met in Philadelphia to discuss revising the Articles of Confederation. The result of that meeting was the creation of a new constitution, which gave the federal government more authority. Many of the framers, including George Washington and James Madison, cited Shays Rebellion as a key example of why stronger, centralized power was necessary. Shays Rebellion may have failed, but it changed America forever. It showed that the Articles of Confederation were too weak and pushed the nation toward creating the Constitution. It proved that even after independence, the struggle to define freedom and government had only just begun.